Finally, Happy New Year to you both.
Can we say Happy New Year yet?
I think so. We've been up since 3.
Happy New Year.
Let's get straight to it then. Take me to the Daily Mirror, Matthew, and it's great, isn't it, to kick off with some positive news. And former England boss Gareth Southgate is part of the honours, along with lots of other people. But you wanted to focus on our former England manager.
Well, there's so many different strands, not least the, in inverted commas, heavily inverted commas, ordinary people like us who actually have been rewarded for doing really, really important work, not least in campaigning against domestic abuse, domestic violence. But here is Sir Gareth, arise Sir Gareth. I think it suits him, smiling broadly on the front page of the Daily Mirror. Now, this is going to antagonise a lot of people.
But
let's
say
be
it
clear.
anyway.
It is going to reignite the culture wars that surrounded his last 2 or 3 years as England manager. But I think he's fully deserving of it because, and I stress this is now men's football, because, of course, Serena Wiegmann has actually won the European Championships for the women's team, and she deserves a Dame
Good for you
Hood.
for mentioning that.
But he is the second most, absolutely, without any doubt, the second most successful England men's football coach of all time. Football is our national sport. He took us to 2 finals in the European Championships, one of which I was lucky enough to go to when we lost narrowly to Italy on penalties. He took us to a World Cup semi-final. And if we can't give him a knighthood, then we're basically throwing up our hands and saying we are a truly hopeless football nation.
Well, it was more than the football too, I think, because he is such a gentleman of the sport, and the way he rallied around, particularly the younger players in the squad, I think was so important.
He acted with great dignity, and I'm pleased you brought up the younger players, because people say, oh, well, he was in charge of this new golden generation, he should have done better. He was the bloke who actually encouraged youth, who brought them in at the first available opportunity.
Yeah.
As someone who doesn't really follow football at all, I can't comment on his kind of his skills as manager, but what did reach me was that sense of leadership and honour amongst sports people.
I thought you were going to say the waistcoat. Do you remember the waistcoat in 2018?
Oh, he's always very dapper. Yeah, very smart, very smart. But I mean, I don't think he's going for services to fashion. Perhaps that did
maybe another time.
But I think that the sense of football being something that we could be proud of as a nation. I think that definitely changed the dial for me, his leadership, definitely.
Well, also on the list, as Matthew said, ordinary people, including some of those wronged sub-postmasters.
Exactly. So ordinary people who find themselves in the heart of absolutely horrendous circumstances, who then step forwards and take extraordinary steps. And for the people who have been given these accolades in the New Year's honours, over many, many years, at great personal cost in many cases, because there's a point at which I'm sure people around you are saying, maybe it's time to stop, maybe it's time to give up, and they don't give up. So Lee Castleton, Joe Hamilton, Christopher Head, Seema Misra, all sub-postmasters receiving OBEs for their work to reveal, to expose the post office scandal. Of course, following in the footsteps of Alan Bates receiving his becoming Sir Alan Bates in the King's birthday honours in the summer.
We're speaking to Lee Castleton in the next hour of the show, so it'll be so important just to figure out how he feels, whether it's that bittersweet moment.
Well,
I imagine it must be.
Well, the fight goes on, of course.
Yeah, of course it has.
As one of these postmasters, former postmasters, has said. But it's quite interesting because they fought the establishment. And in the end, they've won, although, as I say, there's still... It's still ongoing, still progress to be made. But these are seen as establishment honours, aren't they, in a way? And this rather undermines that idea, that these are honours for everybody.
I think, though, that you can have that balance, can't you, where there's an acknowledgement by the system saying we need these challenges, we need people to have the courage and the support to be able to stand up and fight, because that holds us to account. I mean, perhaps I'm being a little bit rose-tinted there, but I think it's even more important that the establishment does honour those David figures fighting Goliath, because it's such a stacked
Just while we're on the establishment, very briefly, I'm not sure, and as someone who might be known on social media as, broadly speaking, having supported the idea of a Labour government, I am not convinced that a Labour Prime Minister, to the extent that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has been involved in this, knighting a serving Labour mayor is
This
the
is Sadiq
best
Khan.
use. Yes, Sadiq Khan is the best use of the honour system, particularly, one might say, when Starmer had a real pop, quite rightly, I think, at Boris Johnson and the way that he used the honour system.
Yeah, it has received mixed reviews, for sure. We'll leave it there. Talk me through A&E departments being hit by coughs, colds, flus. During the festive period, that happened quite a lot.
This is a really important story, and I want to start by saying that Adrian Boyle, who is president of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, said that the various diagnoses that people are going to A&E for, things like coughs and colds and so forth, that at first glance you think they shouldn't be doing that, and to some extent they shouldn't be doing that, but he does say that they should be taken with a grain of salt. For example, he says, nosebleeds can be dangerous in older people or people taking blood-thinning drugs. Now, at the absolute core of this is that A&E departments are under massive strain already, very serious strain.
There's a critical incident in Wales that's been declared.
Indeed, yesterday, exactly, where they just weren't able to cope properly. It was affecting care. 96% of NHS trust leaders say they're worried about the effect of winter pressures on an already stretched NHS. Why are people attending A&E for the sort of ailments that we've described? Partly because primary care units, our primary healthcare system, is also under strain, and so people are feeling desperate. And if you are, by the way, one of those people on one of the waiting lists, you know, languishing on a waiting list, and you are experiencing chronic and sometimes extreme pain, is there any wonder that people are going to A&E for back pain?
But it's not just primary care that's failing and then pushing the burden onto accident and emergency. It's also social care. It's also mental health care, because people hit crisis and have nowhere else to turn. Your options are to call the police or to go to A&E. And neither of those places are the right places for people who are very vulnerable and in crisis, or people who are being looked after at home or in a care facility, and those staff can't cope. And so they go, well, what can we do? All we can do is call an ambulance.
Yeah, and then once they do arrive at a hospital site, the front page of The Guardian reporting that these hospital buildings across England are in such a dilapidated state. So they're at fire risks, they're just not the place to be.
It's a tragedy waiting to happen, really. These are the alarm bells in our public buildings that are the equivalent of Grenfell is going to happen again, but this time it's going to be in a hospital. And earlier this week, The Guardian ran a story about the absolutely terrible state of some school buildings. And you think it's estimated that it will cost the NHS in England £13.8 billion to remedy the buildings that are in catastrophic states of disrepair. 2.7 billion of that is buildings that are currently in a high risk to safety. So that might be roofs falling in or floors falling in.
This is why we need investment. We need growth ultimately, but we desperately need investment right now.
We're going to end 30 seconds. Talk me through Hogmanay, Matthew.
It's cancelled.
It's cancelled. That's it.
Yeah.
It's cancelled because of really bad weather, dangerous weather in Scotland.
As people flock to ring in the new year.
Now's the time to get your Christmas presents out and actually do that 1,000-piece jigsaw.
There you go.
Or phone a friend. Talk to
or phone a friend. I love it. Thank you so much,
News.
Matthew. Always watch Sky News. Thank you so much. More after the break from us.
There's always more to the news than a headline.